Andre Karpathy, described software 1.0 being the traditional way of doing software, and software 2.0 programs learn from examples as opposed to being explicitly coded, and software 3.0 where we are using LLMs and prompt engineering to do the coding.
Actually, I came to the same conclusion. What he did not say, however, and which is interesting, what is 4.0 and what is 5.0? 4.0 will be autonomous intent systems. And then number 5, in my opinion, will be AI native organizations.
In 2023, I heard Microsoft research and they said copilots can help you with productivity. They make you 55% more productive. 2 years later, now Copilot agents can fix the code on their own, do their commits on their own. They're much more autonomous right now. So as a public sector leader, decision maker, how should I think about equipping my team?
Some of the vendors just overhyped, right? That human in the loop is staying and will stay for some time. AI, at this point, I believe, is disruptor. It's not incremental change. It's disruptive. In other words, it's going to redefine the roles. I know a lot of people are a little bit anxious. I'm going to lose my job. No, you're not. But your role is going to change.
I remembered a metaphor. I forget, maybe Jeremy Howard said, developers thinking that developers' jobs are going away by AI is like a carpenter thinking that their job is going away because a table saw was invented.
Today, I am running a new department that is called Advanced Technology Solutions. And as this department, we focus on the improvement of productivity of our teams using the emerging technologies. AI is obviously the most obvious at this point, but there could be anything else.
For any of the public sector leaders who are watching and wondering, technology is changing so fast and how do I change my teams? Well, Andre is a perfect man because he's right now doing it for public sector and that's his focus.
I was interacting with Claude and it was just generating for me what I wanted. And it was pretty decent with that. And it tried to fix this bug and then stopped and said, oh, yes, I found it. Now I know how to fix it. Guess what it removed?
What?
Security. So it's not there yet, but we are getting close to that, right? The other principle that is really important, and my early mentor in my life told me, you have to reinvent yourself at least once in your lifetime. If you look at AI at this point, we all need to reinvent.
Welcome to govai.fm, your no-nonsense guide to AI in the public sector. Connect with peers and learn from real successes, failures, and lessons from the trenches.
Welcome to govai.fm. Today we are joined by Andre Kaminski, a technology leader, an educator, a mentor with more than 3 decades experience in software delivery, DevOps, Agile, all of those things. I'm lucky to have seen his magic firsthand. He can turn a loose crowd of developers into a disciplined yet empowered battalions of laser-focused teams that ship real value. And whether he's steering an agile rollout or he's teaching lean fundamentals, Andre always, I've seen, shapes inventive, high-trust teams that deliver value not just faster, but smarter. Today, our main goal is to tap into the wealth of the experience in DevOps that Andre has and how DevOps is going to be reimagined in the age of AI. So, Andre, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Girish, for inviting me.
Great. Awesome. So, to begin with, we wanted to go a little bit in your personal journey. So, your career spans in leadership, engineering, community leadership, authoring a book. So, if you trace back and maybe tell your story and the key moments, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely. But my story is pretty long, so we could actually fill the entire podcast just talking about that. But maybe to just keep a couple of highlights that really formed who I am today. So I was born in Poland, in a communist country, and behind the Iron Curtain. And from early childhood, I knew that I don't belong there. I cannot be constrained. And ultimately, I escaped to Germany and I went to university in Saarbrücken. And then I moved to South Africa, where I spent 20 years. I was running company in South Africa. Then I was sent to Europe to open branches in primarily in Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. I was operating for several years, the company there. And then I came back to South Africa, and then I moved to Canada in 2003. So I had this multicultural experience. I actually lived there. It's not just like a tourist where you go, for a couple of weeks or even months. I actually lived in those cultures and I learned languages and I had to really understand how those cultures work. And then the other thing as well is I actually have master's degree in structural engineering. And I spent maybe first 2 years working as a structural engineer, building the various structures, complicated, but I found it extremely boring. After 2 years, I knew exactly how much reinforcement is going to go into a particular pillar or slab. I didn't need to do any calculations. It wasn't really challenging for me. And I always knew that IT was actually the one that I really belong to because I can be challenged. There is not a single software that is exactly the same, and you can get the feedback almost immediately. So you can grow and you can learn very, very quickly. So that's where I actually started my career in IT. And then I moved from software developer to project manager. Then I was a research and development manager and CTO. Just in the year 2000, we are listed in NASDAQ. So this was pretty serious company, but unfortunately, what's happened, .bomb in 2000, and obviously company shut down, unfortunately. Today, I'm working with WorkSafe VC, where for last 8 years, if you remember, so I was brought in really to WorkSafe to help establish DevOps. And we are really successful. And today I am running a new department that is called Advanced Technology Solutions. And as you know, the speed of change of technology change is so fast at this point that nobody can actually do this at the side of the desk. And there's a risk that the organization will not be able to really take advantage of those technological changes and advancements, or potentially could go in the wrong direction. So what we want to do is, as a department, we focus on the improvement of productivity of our teams using the emerging technologies. AI is obviously the most obvious at this point, but there could be anything else like a blockchain and so on, so on. So we are actually looking at all those areas.
Wow, this is so perfect. So for any of the public sector leaders who are watching and they're wondering on there's technology is changing so fast and how do I change my teams? Well, Andre is like the perfect man because he's right now doing it for public sector and that's his focus. Like look at emerging technology and see how that should shape our teams. So this is going to be very valuable insight for all of you. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that story. So maybe getting to know a little bit more about you and your how you think about transformation and how you think about people and culture. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yes, actually. So thank you for actually bringing this up, because if you remember, that's really what defines me. The center of everything that we do is really the people. And we need to focus about the people. If you think about leadership, the primary goal of leadership is really solving the conflicts. And the conflicts could be productive and non-productive. But it's really leading people is really about constantly being able to manage the conflicts. So last month, I published a book that is called Blending with Dragons. And the subtitle is How Ancient Harmony Principles Transform Modern Conflict. And what I'm using in this book is an Aikido metaphor. I don't know if you know about this, but I've got a black belt in Aikido and I train Aikido for several decades. But Aikido is a martial art, and this requires a little bit explanation what martial art has to do with leadership, right? And the thing is that Aikido is really based on Zen. In contrast to other martial arts where you are about winning and beating up your opponent and so on, Aikido is really about solving a potential interaction with your opponent in such a way that you do not cause harm, but you solve the problem. So you're actually, someone is attacking you, you are able to disarm this particular person without any damage. It's often counterintuitive because it is different than traditional martial art, where in different martial art, like say boxing, you are agitated. And what Aikido says, as a matter of fact, any technique to work, you need to be relaxed, which is counterintuitive, isn't it? That's not how normally you react. The same thing about in boxing, for example, you try to break from your opponent. Aikido says, actually, no, you establish connection with your opponent because you will not be able to redirect and use the technique, or explosive versus calm and so on. So the book really started 15 years ago. And the way how it started, I remember I was walking to my car after the practice, and it was November in Vancouver. As you can imagine, November in Vancouver is rainy and it was dark. So I was just walking to my car. And, when you're on the mat, my sensei always said, leave your problems outside of the mat. When you're on your mat, you just think about the current, about the present, where you are. Don't think about the past. Don't think about the future. You just be on the mat. So now I was walking back to my car. So all my problems came back to me, right? So I was thinking, okay, tomorrow I've got this particular issue that I need to deal with. And suddenly I had a revelation. Actually, one of those techniques that I was using on the mat was just a metaphor to this particular problem that I had. I could actually recognize the link between these two. So I thought, could I actually use this technique that I used over there and just transform this into a human communication? And if I could actually potentially solve the problem. And so when I was driving home, I actually came up with a plan. Next day, it worked. It worked. So it was like, wow, that's actually fascinating. So I started taking notes. And I was just using different techniques and then trying to match to different situations that I had in my life, and then started actually putting those notes together. A couple of years ago, I really thought, wouldn't the world be a better place if we can solve the problems in the way that we don't damage relationships? Because just think about it. Let me give you an example. One of the techniques in Aikido, or one of the attacks, is someone is attacking your head. So striking your head, right? If you translate this to the human office or home problem, it's actually someone attacking your identity. Just imagine that you're in a meeting and someone is actually questioning your professionalism. Now, what's going to happen? Obviously, you are getting really upset, right?
Yeah.
It's defensive, and adrenaline is actually start flowing, and immediately you stop thinking logically. We all think that we are logical creatures, but actually it's not. The emotions taking over, and then you're starting reacting, and then you're damaging the relationship, because the more you push and start shouting at the other person is going to actually shout even more, and then you've got all these people around just looking at you, and you create a damage. So there's one way of doing that. But the other way would be, okay, well, just withdraw, flight. But then it's equally going to damage the relationship, because first of all these people will think that, who you are not able to stand up. And then secondly, the other person will think that they are right, or although potentially they were not. So I thought, is there a better way? Is a third way that will not damage the relationship? Because ultimately, when you go back to the office next day, you still need to work with this person. So can you actually develop a techniques that instead of damaging relationship, they actually strengthen the relationships? And that's what this book is about. So first of all, I put a lot of principles around it, and I gave a specific example of the techniques and their implementation in both office situations and also your personal life. The bottom line is, it is really about the outcome. Asking yourself the question, in this particular conflict, did you achieve the outcome that you wanted? That's the most important. So did you redirect this opponent's energy in the direction that you wanted, and you achieve what you wanted? Not about the outputs, right? The output will be, I won. I actually, I was so aggressive and the other person backed off. And guess what? For half an hour, you feel good. But then you realize you actually damaged the relationship, right? So that's the idea behind the book. And by the way, I am intending to send the copies of these books to some of the politicians out there.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I can totally imagine this being very useful even in personal situations. Next is looking at the arc of the earliest tech projects to AI-powered pipelines. There are some principles that stay, with all the technology and emerging tech changes, and some principles that maybe change, right? So looking at just what principles you think are rock solid and they're going to stay through AI and blockchains and everything, and what's going to change?
Oh, it's an interesting question. As a matter of fact, the first part of my book is about those principles. But specifically when it comes to technology, I am sort of lucky because I lived through most of the most important history of information technology. So my very first language I learned was assembler. And I don't know if you know what assembler is, but assembler really was or is, I think some people are still using it.
You mean assembly language?
Assembler. Assembly, yes,
Assembler.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's working directly with the processor. So you actually code, the registries and move the values and memory addressing and so on, right? And the beauty about this is there is no overhead. There is no superfluous code. Everything has a specific meaning. So ultimately, you are ending up with very small footprint and very fast application because you work directly with the processor, right? Now, the problem with this is it's extremely difficult to write the software, right? And secondly, it's extremely difficult to debug such a software. So your productivity is, obviously you're creating this great and beautiful applications that are very fast, very small, and so on, but you are spending tons of time trying to actually write them. The reason why the assembler was so important at the time was because RAM, the memory, was extremely expensive, right? But over a period of time, the memory became cheaper and cheaper. Ultimately, they became commodity. And so were the processors, the power of the processors. So who cared about if the application is small, if we could actually do it faster? So then the new languages started coming up, which, like let's say C, C++, and so on, the libraries. But the problem with those were that they are for more generic purpose, which means there is an overhead. There is, something, but then, so what, right? It's actually, everything is fast. You don't care about the memory, so actually build those new applications. By the way, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, they were launched in 1977. So it was 48 years ago. And today they are out of the solar system. Each of them had an onboard computer, which had 70 kilobytes of memory, 70 kilobytes. My Apple Watch today has a 1 gigabyte, which is 15,000 times more, which means that with my one Apple Watch, I could control fleet of 15,000 spacecrafts. Now you can see how the technology is changing, right? And how much we can actually achieve with this technology. So one of those principles is really important. Japanese call it wabi-sabi, which is impermanence. In other words, everything is changing, right? And we need to welcome change. The other principle that is really important, and my early mentor in my life told me, you have to reinvent yourself at least once in your lifetime. And I reinvented myself already a couple of times by now. And I honestly have to say that if you look at AI at this point, we all need to reinvent ourselves. It's actually another principle that is extremely important. And then the other one, which I mentioned already, focus on your outcomes. Don't think about your outputs. Outputs are, leading you ultimately to where you want to be. But when I was a project manager, for example, I was often slapped on my wrist because I didn't follow the process. But ultimately, it was really about the outcome. Can I get my customers happy? And how I can do that? How can I actually achieve this? Even if I need to do it in a non-conventional way. In year 2000, Agile came, and it's like I was doing it already, right? It's not like anything new.
Yeah.
So this was good.
Common sense for you.
Right. But, if you think about all of these principles, they are really relevant to AI, to what AI is actually doing today to the society and to us as being in technology, specifically DevOps as well.
Awesome. So I wanted to reflect on this technology change that you're talking about. One of the metaphors was by another Andre that I really love and respect, Andre Karpathy. And when I was doing my coursework in Stanford, like some of the deep learning explanations that he gave were awesome. Like once you understand it the way he's explaining it, it's just an aha moment. Like it just clicks, right? So I really respect him, not just as head of Tesla or something, but as an educator. And one of the things that he described is the software 1.0 being the traditional way of doing software, and software 2.0 being more like machine learning and deep learning, where software is more programs learned from examples as opposed to being explicitly coded. And now it's more like software 3.0, where we are using LLMs and prompt engineering to do the coding. Yeah, and he's describing them as like the new phase in software development, almost like software 3.0. So wanted you to see if this kind of a positioning jives with you and what your thoughts are on it.
He talked about this a couple of months ago, or like 2 or 3 months ago, right? May or something, one of the conferences. And Actually, I was thinking about this already a couple of months ago earlier, and actually I came to the same conclusion. What he did not say, however, and which is interesting, what is 4.0 and what is 5.0? Right? That would be interesting to see. And my thinking at the time was that 4.0 will be autonomous intent systems, which means that systems that understand the business context and then autonomously achieve the outcomes that we need to have, right? He also talked about a little bit earlier, I think February, he was talking about vibe coding. Honestly speaking, that's what is coming. So, you can create a prompt with a business problem, and then the system is going to actually develop itself. And then there will be a self-healing systems that, based on the business requirements, they will be able to refactor. And, we are not far away from this. And then number 5, in my opinion, will be AI native organizations, where the entire organization, where you can actually outsource your work or your mundane work to AI organization that is actually built as a set of AI agents or agentic systems doing the work for you. Right. So we are not far away from that, but prompt engineering is definitely the one that we are currently at. And I think a lot of people or developers and people in IT don't even realize yet that the prompt engineering is way more important right now than coding. Coding became commodity, like assembler or like RAM, like memory, right?
Totally. So English is your new programming language, and or whichever, yeah. Whichever language you use, your natural language is your new programming language. So that's the new paradigm. So maybe we can go a little bit more in depth on this. So there will be many public sector leaders, public sector development team managers wondering that, you know what, in 2023, I heard Microsoft did a research and they said, well, copilots can help you like with productivity. So they are your productivity tools. So you have your developer and they make you 55% more productive, like something like that. 2 years later, now their Copilot agents can fix the code on their own and deploy, like do their commits on their own, can do much more on their own. They're much more autonomous right now. So as a public sector leader, decision maker, how should I think about equipping my team? And how should I think about how to use AI for my software development?
That's a good question. I have to tell you that some of the vendors just overhyped, right? And oversell. We are getting there, but we are still not there. Human in the loop is staying and will stay for some time. When we talk about AI tooling, we think about improvement or incremental change of the way how we work, thinking that the role of us going to stay as it is today. So by using these tools, we will become more productive. Well, yeah, in the short term, yes. But AI at this point, I believe, is disruptor. It's not incremental change. It's disruptive. In other words, it's going to redefine the roles. I know a lot of people are a little bit anxious because what's going to happen with my job? I'm going to lose my job. No, you're not. But your role is going to change. You will not be coding today if you're a coder, or you are not going to do the system architecture that you are using, or you're doing this before, and now you're just going to use the tools. You'll be architecting these systems in a totally different way, right? So I think, and the reason why I'm working on this at this point, because I want to, as a part of advanced technology solutions, as I said, that's our role to see where we're going to be and show the path how to get there. So specifically that's why I'm developing the future state of what the software development lifecycle is going to look like and what it means to each of the roles that we have today versus what they are going to be tomorrow. And once I have that, I would like to start mapping a plan. Okay, so how are we going to get there? Because that's not going to happen. So the stage 1, or let's say 1.0, will be where we actually using GitHub Copilot, for example, help us with the code. Then stage 2, which is already happening as well at this point, is where you've got the autonomous agents supporting you, and you actually start working and helping you so you can actually delegate some of the mundane work, right? And then progressively is going to get to the point where we will be building these systems in the way that will be cloud, that will be AI native, right? And that's, I think, where the future is going to be. But honestly speaking, like Satya Nadella recently said, between 20 to 30% of code is already generated by AI. And that's true. But it's still not there because, I can give you an example. I was just last week, I was writing code. And yes, I still write code, so I'm dangerous. But what I did, I was interacting with Claude, and it was just generating for me what I wanted, and it was pretty decent with that. One of the very first things that I actually asked in the prompt was, I want to make this software protected from perspective of security vulnerabilities, and to ensure that nobody can hack into this system, but also no spammers can harvest any information, and so on and so on. So the very first thing that actually Claude did, it actually developed those modules, and it was like, perfect, all right, looks good. And then I was continuing with the rest of the functionality, and from time to time I was just getting the bugs and errors, and so I actually provided the feedback. It fixed it. Once it fixed it in one area, it actually broke something else, right? And so we ultimately were just going through several iterations, and at certain point there was another bug, and it tried to fix this bug, and then stopped and said, "Oh, yes, I found it. Now I know how to fix it. I removed the entire block that was actually preventing us from the rest of the application to work." Guess what it removed?
What?
Security.
Oh.
So it's not there yet, but we are getting
Okay.
we are getting close to that, right?
Okay. I think you answered the next question already, but just to make it more concrete for the listeners, based on your early forays into making this roadmap on how should an organization embrace the new way of doing things, what are the things that it does well right now and not does well right now? And you used Claude. Claude is, by the way, for the listeners, one of the large language models like OpenAI's large language models, and you can use it directly either go to the Claude. They have their new tool, Claude Code, or you can go to their website, or you can use it through something like a Cursor, which is an IDE which you can connect, and which is like your GitHub Copilot, but you can connect to Claude to get the models. I've been trying with Cursor and all, and I see the tab completions work very well, where you start writing a code and it just completes it for you, because many tasks within programming are very predictable, right? Like imagine you're writing a small function, a lot of tasks are very predictable. So tab completions work very well. Unit tests kind of work well based on what you're saying and based on what Claude does. Some scaffolding codes work very well. Some greenfield apps, like you're mentioning, like I'm creating a new app which is not like connected to a big legacy code, that works very well. But you said like something, if it is a big piece of code where one place it works and the other place it might not work. So if you're refactoring like a big legacy code, maybe not, or heavy business logic, maybe not, something like that. Like, is that the current state?
Correct. The biggest challenge that current LLMs have that are being implemented in all those systems, it's good with the simple things. Like, for example, as you said, providing you code suggestions or code completion and so on. Where it struggles is the context and the memory. So it's losing the context. The larger the software becomes, it's actually start losing that context. And I'm just hoping within the next few months, and I think OpenAI is getting pretty close when they released GPT 4.1, which is, I think, 1 million tokens context, which means like it's a couple of hundred books they would actually write. So that should actually solve the problem. But at this point, it's still the issue. The deeper you get, it starts forgetting what it did or what did you ask before, and then it leads to hallucinations, right? And that's a big challenge, because as a humans, we don't check then and we start trusting, then we are in trouble, right? So that's one of the issues. Definitely is a problem. And using AI is like learning to ride a bike. And I don't remember what your experience was when you were trying to ride a bike, but it's complicated system, right? We are not naturally born with riding and keeping the balance in that way. So we are falling and we have to think on so many things. Similar is actually with AI and prompting and actually thinking what we really want to do and what the outcome we want to get. So it will take a little bit time also in, from perspective of how we going to really write or develop the software in the future, right? As in my department, this new department that I have, we are working right now on 2 agentic systems, or working on several ones, but actually those 2 are pretty interesting. One is called what we currently call UAT AI agent, which originally was to help the business to create in natural language, to create the tests of their application, so we can actually unblock the release times The business is a blocker. I mean, we've got several teams that can deliver fast, but then you hit that block because there is only a small group of people who can actually test it. So what we do, this particular agent or agentic system, what does it do? It actually uses or look at application as a white box. So in other words, just sees on the screen like you would see the very first time. You learn it, right? So you look at the application and on the screen, you see some boxes, some text fields. You've got a couple of buttons. It tries to, so one of those agents that runs behind the scenes is actually developing a plan. So trying to identify what to click, what type of information I can actually enter here, and then what are the decision points? Because depending on the decision point, another part of the application might open and might actually change, right? The application is dynamic. So the planner or this designer is actually creating an entire tree of potential test cases, right? And then interacts with a human saying, okay, these are the test cases. Would you like me to keep them or you want to change something? And if the user says, actually, I like that, and they click, okay, I want to save it. What does it do? It actually saves to our repository, so it could be reused in the future. But at the same time, behind the scenes, it converts that natural language into playwright script. So if you think about it, during execution, there's another agent that actually executes them in the future. If on average, the test per application takes about 5 minutes, the executor is able to do it within 1 to 2 seconds because it's already everything defined and the script is there. And even more, you usually got one particular business user can test so many applications in sequence, right? We can run multiple agents at the same time. So within 2-3 minutes, we can test entire suite of applications. Right? It's a game changer. Initially, this was for the business users, but then we actually look at this. Actually, this is way more powerful. It could be used by product owner to discover what the application is do and helping them to really understand the application and then develop their own cases. Product managers, QA engineers, or even developers, they can actually test the application themselves, right? So that's one of those applications. And then the other one that we are working on is what we call advanced AI agent, which is actually looking from the black box perspective, is looking from the code perspective and scans the entire code, trying to figure out what is the application trying to do. And then checks each functions and checks if there is a unit test. If they are not, writes the unit test. Check the integrations and develop the integration tests, API tests, end-to-end tests. And here comes the challenge that we faced because the context window is too small. And it starts hallucinating because if the application is larger, then it actually starts getting out of the context. And so that's what we are working right now, trying to figure out, how to solve it. I'm hoping that OpenAI is going to actually help with that.
Awesome. So for the listeners here, using AI for your test harnesses, whether it's black box testing or white box testing, is a promising area. And that's something Andre is working on. And we would love to know more about your progress as you go. So maybe we'll invite you again for that. Awesome. Vibe coding is a buzzword. You mentioned it a couple of times too. What do you think it looks like in practice? Like for business leaders, would you say that let your developers do vibe coding? How do you like the creative upside against the governance issues? What do you think? What advice would you give?
So Andre Karpathy actually came up with this concept, I think in February of this year, and he immediately ruffled the feathers of the community in the wrong way, right? And you know why? I'm thinking this is really more psychological because we as developers, our identity is really coding, right? We were for 50 years. We are the gurus that only us can actually do this stuff and we understand how to do this. And it became like a pillar that everybody is holding to because that's what identifies us as developers. If there is no coding, who are we? Right? So that's the reason why there is so much resistance and uproar about it. But if you think about this, what he did, and as a matter of he said that at a certain point, the code became so complicated that he didn't even look at this anymore, right? But that doesn't matter. The question is not about the outputs and having a beautiful code, but the outcomes. Is this application doing what you want to do, right? Now, taking obviously into account that it has to be secure and so on, all this.
Maintainable,
Right.
Yeah.
So this has to be for sure in place. But let's be honest, that example that I was giving you on the application I was working last week, it was interactive. interactive actually session, right, where I was providing feedback. And there is no reason for in the future that having some adversarial type of agent that actually competes with the one that is writing and actually making this software better. Ultimately, after several iterations, it's going to lead to application that works. And did I achieve my outcome? Yes, I did. That's what I want. So it's coming. Honestly speaking, it's coming, but it also requires redefinition and showing the path for the development community where they are going to be in the future, how they contribute to this. It's not going to replace them. It's going to transform the way how they actually work. And I think that's what he did, right?
Yeah, totally. So what your advice, I would say, is embrace it, like other public sector leaders, embrace it, do not resist it. Right now, it is not working. You showed some examples of things it won't work, but that doesn't mean that it won't work in future. There are other ideas, like you mentioned, adversarial agents. We can make it work, and we will make it work. So embrace it early and experiment with it.
And it will be even faster than we think, because if you think about this, in every type of revolution or technology revolution, when it comes, it goes through a spike, and then like internet, and then it just settles down, and things become normal, and then there's not the spike, and it goes normal. I think at this point, instead of slowing down after the peak, it's going to speed up. And the reason for that is because now we are using AI to help us to think or develop system faster. So innovation, it will be way faster than it was before, which means it's going to lead to cognitive overload. We will not be able to think and remember. I mean, like in my organization, you cannot find one person who knows all the systems that we have. No ways, right? It's going to become more and more complicated. So we have to use AI to augment us in managing this cognitive overload, and it's coming. And for my advice to any technology leader in any organization, as a matter of fact, not only public sector, any sector, embrace it, because it's coming, and you need to be ready. You need to transform, or thinking about transforming your organization in such a way that this can actually leverage those tools. Otherwise, you're going to be left out, right?
Based on what you said, I remembered a metaphor. I forget, maybe Jeremy Howard or somebody. They said developers thinking that like developers' jobs are going away by AI is like a carpenter thinking that their job is going away because a table saw was invented. Your job is going to change, but it's not going to go away. So cool. So what I wanted to do is, we are like, both of us are very bullish on AI and what AI can do to this space of software development. Wanted to get into some of the gotchas. You got into one example already, which was trust and having a human in the loop being very important. Otherwise, it can take away that security code, right? Like that kind of stuff. So having trust and human in the loop right now in this space, very important. Later on, we can solve it by having adversarial agents and all, but very important either way. Any other governance issues? I wanted to maybe touch base on copyright and provenance. So Copilot sometimes surface licensing code in suggestions, because Copilot, they are just like reading everything on the internet. And how do you track provenance and stay out of copyrights? Like, have you thought about it? Just something to keep in the back of the mind.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a huge problem. And again, I'm just coming back to the software development lifecycle, because this changes this type of information that we did not have to deal before. When we write software, and we write our own software, right? Unless we just use some kind of libraries, but then you become whatever type of licensing it is. But nowadays, it's difficult to control, because whatever you're building might use a proprietary information from someone else, and you don't know who built the LLM. So part of that software development lifecycle and the new roles that are going to be in place will be actually monitoring and scanning for that type of issues. What is the source of the data? Can you track how it was used? There are two parts to that when I think about this. The one is the hidden layer. If you use LLM, someone else trained it. And so you don't really have a control. However, you might detect some of those potential issues. The other one is a quasi-open, which would be like how we track the reasoning that is happening. Is this using any proprietary approach or something like that? So what I'm thinking, and I'm actually putting this in the software development lifecycle, there will be specific roles that will be responsible for tracking the type of information. And also potentially there is going to be a role of AI auditors, or even agents that are going to identify, and still humans are going to be in the loop, but we'll need to identify, and is a complex problem, but absolutely this is critical. Governance is probably most critical at this point, and it's difficult in contrast to traditional world because it's so much information, right? Everything AI is really built on the data that really it's introducing this cognitive overload, and without having some AI systems helping us with the governance, we will not be able to manage. So it's definitely a critical issue.
Okay, that's great. So, advice for the business leaders here that, there are a lot of upsides, but as Andre said, human in the loop, copyright and provenance issues. Andre earlier already mentioned privacy and security being very important, like the code that is being written and that having all those kind of items. Those are very important governance items to keep in mind as you embrace AI more and more. So, embrace, but also keep this governance in mind. Beautiful.
In the short term, we as in DevOps, for example, we can actually start building the data pipelines. For example, you sanitize the data that's actually flowing. So, for example, automatic removal of any personally identifiable information or personal health records or information, right? Prompt engineering. Whenever the developers develop the prompt, there should be pre-prompt validation that actually scans for, the type of information to ensure there is no, you're not violating
Sensitive,
any, right. And then, developing also policy as a code where you have some kind of, break glass emergency procedures where something, happens, something is disclosed, you actually immediately stop the entire system because, it can proliferate very quickly, right? So that's why it requires a proper architecture and thinking about that, right? It's a paradigm shift. And that's mostly the biggest challenge currently to organizations.
Awesome. Okay, so what we wanted to sum up a lot of our discussion with was envision a AI native tooling stack, workflow, and even org structure. So I wanted to maybe start with like tooling and process. Like looking ahead, does the DevOps setup, what does a future DevOps setup look like? Like what IDEs, what pipelines, what like the UATs being automated? You mentioned a few of them. Anything else you wanted to mention in this space?
I'm passionate about DevOps. I am leading the DevOps Vancouver meetup, and we've got over 3,000 members, right? We started in 2017, and at the time, it was relatively new. The idea was to help the community and organizations to start adopting DevOps. And in the last meetup that I had, I said the following statement: DevOps is going to actually disappear because the DevOps in the current form was to bridge the gap between the development and operation communities that are driven by a totally different set of goals. Honestly speaking, with AI at this point, this barrier completely disappears. It's going to lead really to NoOps because a lot of this stuff, practically speaking, could be managed by AI. But before we get to that point, there is a lot of steps that needs to happen. So we sort of started changing the profile of that DevOps Vancouver meetup to start including AI. So inviting more and more speakers that are talking about exactly about those topics. And there's a lot of organizations. Our first organization adopting that are the observability organizations. They've got already a lot of tools. They've got the machine learning, and then they're trying to predict obviously what's going to happen with the systems. But before we get there, before there is a fully autonomous systems that will be able to help developers, will be able to increase their productivity by using, let's talk about the IDE, right? Development environments. And it's not only about now integrating some kind of autonomous agents within those IDEs that can do the work for you, so you can delegate pieces of the code. But also there is going to come very soon the multimodal interfaces, where, for example, you can sketch on piece of paper a diagram of how the application is supposed to work. You show it right to the camera, and actually going to develop that or provides at least skeleton code for you so you can start filling that. So
or ask you further clarifying questions than what do you want this to be? Yeah, something like that.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So the mundane work we can actually automate for you. But what is going to be interesting is the predictive debugging. So understanding the entire context of the application, knowing already what the potential problems you're going to have. And the other one, which is really interesting, will be the team-aware IDE, which means developers can actually branch the code they work on specific features into their separate branches. At certain point when they finish, they actually merge it into the master repository, which is the main code of the application. But if there are 2 or 3 people or 4 people or 5 people working on different pieces of code, but they branched the same area, there are going to be conflicts because they changed something. So now during the merge, there is always a hell because, the finger pointing and then refactoring, waste of time and so on. Actually, those new tools will be able to detect the potential problem that someone else is working on this code. They didn't check it in yet, but they already working on this. So please do not write piece in this way or be aware that they are working on this. So write it in such a way that the merge is going to be natural. So we are going to avoid it. So, there is a lot of opportunities that AI is bringing.
That's a very good specific example of thing that this cognitive revolution can help with a specific problem that we have had for a long time. That's awesome. So that's about some toolings and the processes. Now let's talk about the team. So like how the teams of the future would be. So I was speaking to one of the Googler and he was talking about how each individual developer, they are looking as a team lead who is having junior developers who are more like these agents who are doing their code. But like looking at it broadly, how do you see a change in the team structure, or do you see the change in org structures for software teams?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, as advanced technology solutions, that's what we are doing right now. One of the streams that you're working on is actually the new team model and how it is going to look like in the future. So the case that you just described at this point is exactly what we're looking at. So if you remember, when we established DevOps at WorkSafe BC, the teams, the pods, as we call them here, they could be up to 12 people. We've got the 4 developers, we've got a QA engineer, we've got a product owner, we've got the business engineer, and so on, so on, so on. The new team model that we are actually using in ATS, in Advanced Technology Solutions, consists of only 2 developers. And there is no tester. There is no QA engineer because they need to use their own tools to test. So in other words, there are AI agents that are actually helping with the testing, right? And the hypothesis that we said that the team that is smaller can be as productive as the larger team when they are augmented by AI. And at this point, it's really working extremely well. And having smaller teams reduces the overhead. Communication overhead, number of meetings, and so on. So teams becoming actually more productive, not only from perspective of using the AI tools, but also from perspective of how they are able to perform. So that's where we are at this point, and we are eating our own food. So in other words, we are using our own tools to help us actually build those applications.
Awesome. So now if that's where we are heading, then again, the listeners, if they want to empower their people to work in this new way, how do they upskill their teams? One is we will, if they are in the Vancouver region, we'll tell them to go to your Vancouver DevOps meetup for sure. But any other ideas, or what are the things to do for upskilling?
Just recently at WorkSafe, we launched what we call Dev AI COP, Community of Practice. So the idea here is really to be hands-on learning for people that actually doing the development. There should not be PowerPoint presentations. There should be actually a real stuff and people actually code. So in other words, either we, at the beginning of the session, we set up a specific problem and they break out in the rooms, separate rooms, and they collaborate. And then at the end, they actually show what they did. But they, at the same time, they actually learn, right? And exchange the information. And the idea is really to start popularizing those new solutions so developers start thinking in the new way how you build the software. So one of the biggest skills that actually defines what the developer of the future is going to be is a prompt engineering. There won't be the coders. There will be prompt engineers. And that's what the biggest challenge is. Honestly speaking, everything in the, I would say, next 2 years is going to be focused on will be the prompt engineering. Not only from people developing the applications, but also system architects who will need to, or even the, I would say, business level architects. When you start the requirements for the application, you need to start thinking when you are conversing with the business subject matter experts that you actually create the prompts or blueprints of the prompts that embed the business logic by showing a specific examples in English so the system can actually learn. So then you've got those prompts, then the developers or prompt engineers going to reuse for a specific problem and dynamically actually modify them. So every single role will need to take into account the prompt engineering. Think about systems architects or AI system architects. They will need to develop a system and taxonomies for those different prompt blueprints, because there are different levels, right? You can inherit actually the prompts, you can version the prompts, and so on. So all these things need to be taken into account. That completely changes the way how we think about developing the software or writing a new applications.
Very good, very good. So prompts and prompt engineering, English is your new programming language. So think of it as a first-class citizen. It needs to be virgin like you virgin your code, and it needs to have the rigor as you have for your code. It's great advice. Thank you. So now we are getting to the close. So there are some business leaders, this is all new to them. Even they're early in their DevOps journey. So this is all new to them. So if you were like a public sector CIO or some business leader with a modest budget and wanted to experiment and kickstart with some AI powered DevOps, is there any general advice you have?
Yeah, where I would start is exactly where we started with. So creating a department like advanced technology solutions. So I'm lucky actually to work for Works ABC. I've got a visionary leader, Todd Yule, who actually is really very much into foreseeing the future and allows us to do that. But the real problem is not so much the technology itself. The real problem in organization is going to be really the change management. Because as I said before, it is almost like an identity crisis for certain groups. And there's going to be a huge amount of resistance, right? So the idea is to start slow. And the biggest challenge, I think, in organizations and for many people is they don't know the road forward. That's why they are resistant. And I think people want to change because there is a burning platform right now and they realize that there is, but they don't know where to start. And if you think, oh, I'm going to take a course, which course? Just look what's happening right now. Like it's changing on daily basis. You don't even know where to start. So in ATS, one of those reasons is to develop the software development lifecycle, what the future is going to be, so we can map how you're going to transition this role to, let's say, prompt engineer, or how it's going to move the AI solution architect, or and so on, right? So once this is actually shown, even if we don't have all the answers at this point yet, people will start seeing the path. And I think that's going to reduce resistance. And if you start with the small experiments, and I know it's hard for people to have no fear culture or fear of failure, right? It's like, there is no failure. I was describing riding the bike. Well, you cannot ride bike without falling, right? But ultimately, actually, you're riding bike. Everybody is riding bike. The same thing with AI. People should not be afraid of falling or failing in this case, right? It's not a failure. It's lessons learned. So if the leaders are able to create organization environments like this is going to help to transform the entire organization to those new models.
Awesome. Great advice. Okay, now lightning round. So I'm going to ask some quick questions and then what comes top of your mind. One myth about AI you would love to retire.
That AI is a magic and it's going to solve all your problems and you can trust. You need to really think what is supposed to be the outcome and validate it. In other words, you want to really ask the questions like, show me what's your path of thinking before you accept that. So, one of the things is recently Apple published a white paper where they actually said that deep reasoning models are not really deep reasoning, right? There was like an uproar, like those sort of AI experts. And you can notice, like, just go to LinkedIn and you see every second person over there is AI expert right now in something, right? And all of them are just, oh, this is such a cheat. How is that? This is, I was always thinking there's deep reasoning. But anybody who knows how generative AI work and how the large language models were trained, well, yes, it's a pattern matching. Yes, it is actually the closest one, right? What the deep learning models do is just how deeply they will learn how many layers you had, right? That's what it is. So the thing is, people stop thinking that there is something supernatural over there and is going to solve your problems. It's actually something that we know, and the machine is just translating for us.
Beautiful. I love that answer. So on a personal note, what daily habits or mantras keep you effective in this fast moving world? You're very good at like creating this new team, all the changes. So what helps you?
Well, keep your eyes on the target. What's your outcome? Constantly think about the outcome, because there's so much white noise and you will be distracted. One of the things I'm telling my teams that there's a story, and I'm pretty sure you know that Homer wrote 2,500 years ago, Odyssey. And there is one of the stories in the Odyssey where Odysseus, the major character, meets sirens. And sirens are those that are actually trying to distract you. And I said to my team, look, on the way where we want to achieve those agents, for example, you are going to have those sirens on daily basis. Like, oh, there's a new framework that came up, or there's a new tool, and you never get to your end goal. So once you took direction, just follow it.
I love that advice because there are so many, like a lot of, like you were saying, experts, like a lot of these AI experts were 8 months ago blockchain experts, and now they changed to AI. So whatever is the new trend, like they become an expert at that. Very good advice. Bold prediction. What headline about AI-powered DevOps would we be reading in 2030?
Even earlier, was probably we are going to start seeing AI native teams, departments, and then entirely AI native organizations. So you will be able to outsource some of the work actually to those that actually someone else that, or entire organization is actually managing that mundane stuff for you, reading documents or, translating, whatever it is. You don't have to worry about this, right? So just focus on the outcome. And the outcome is not writing new API, for example. Right? The outcome is what you're going to do with this API. So, for example, outsource this, versioning of the APIs or maintenance of those APIs to an organization or to specific, even AI native team. So you focus on delivery of the value to your customers or to your stakeholders.
Awesome. Last question. Any resources you would recommend to tech leaders to explore AI?
What's changing so quickly that it's, any books recommendation, for example, that would be really unfair because, it's becoming obsolete on a daily basis. But I think the most important is really to keep touch with community. So being open all the time. So for example, in our case is a DevOps Vancouver meetup, where you can actually exchange or meet with people and see what others are doing at this point and where they are going. And obviously, constantly scanning the blogs coming from those big ones, specifically, look, Andre Kaminski, for example, right? Some of these people, look and read them because they are forward-thinking. And there is a lot of stuff that's coming out of them that is going to be in the near future, which will help you to map your direction.
That's great. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your wisdom. And we really look forward to your ATS, Advanced Technology team, and how the roadmap is mapped out. And we hope we can invite you again to get a scoop of what has been cooked.
Thank you very much for this conversation. I really enjoy that because this is my passion. So I could take.
I know. I could feel it. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was govai.fm. Connect with us on LinkedIn, suggest a guest, and stay tuned for real stories from AI in action.